kicked off a new Unity project, hit new, label the project Hollow Knight, away we go. But it's that pain and it's those mistakes and it's that risk you take that is your growth. At least at the time, there was this assumption, again, Unity makes it easy. What's another dimension? We'll be okay. But
what's a Z-axis?
Yeah, what is this other axis?
It's fine.
Yeah.
Now you're working on your debut game for your studio. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Quest Markers. On this show, we talk about video games and the people behind them. My name is Marina. I'm a video game composer, vocalist, sound designer, audio engineer, and your host. And today I am so excited to have David with us. David is a former member of Team Cherry and worked on Hollow Knight, which is one of my favorite games, and has since co-founded his own studio, Ember League. And you're currently working on your debut title. I'm so excited to dig into that today. Today, we'll be talking about David's game dev journey from Hollow Knight and Exo One to founding Ember League. And as always, this episode will be timestamped with the topics we cover. So if you're watching the VOD, feel free to jump around. And if you're here with us on Twitch, we do have emote-only chat for the duration of the recording, but we'll open that up for Q&A at the very end. And I'm very excited for today's conversation. And David, before we dive into your introduction, how are you staying hydrated?
I've gone with the tried and true water, but in a little tiny form factor, little stubby guy.
It's so cute.
I feel like I'm on an airliner, but it's good. It's the joke.
I love that. I love it. I have an obnoxiously large coffee the size of my head.
It looks very refreshing.
It's pretty good. And then I have some water with electrolytes in it because I'm trying to stay extra hydrated in, I guess, the summer for me,
That's
winter for you.
Crave.
That's it. All right, let's dig in. Before we get into kind of your game dev journey, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's David Kazi. I am the founder and creative director of Ember League. And yes, as you mentioned, formerly worked on Hollow Knight as a technical director.
Love it. I would love to start with learning about your path and how you got into game development, because I feel like everyone has a different way that they pursue it. So tell us a little bit more about your journey, kind of getting into game development up until where you are today.
Yeah, it goes back quite a bit, but an interesting thing for me as a professional developer, that started quite late in my career. So I'd had an entire sort of career prior to that, but game dev probably stemmed from childhood of playing games. So I was very lucky to grow up in an environment where I've had an amazing group of friends. Some of them I'm still friends with to this day. So we have a very tight-knit group, people I went to school with. And we would, between us, we all had one of the consoles or a PC or something, so it was amazing that collectively we were able to each try out all the different library of games. And probably aging myself here, but this was in the time when you would go to the video store and you could hire games. And so, weekly or whatever, we would regularly hire new games to try out. So it was a wonderful series of games that just kept coming out, and this stuff all inspired us. And we were always very creative, just having fun doing video. We would make videos with whatever we could, at the time. I remember doing things like Microsoft Movie Maker, if that's a throwback to anyone who remembers that, just to make silly videos for each other on that. But so yeah, and that exposure really at the time, I mean, again, it's interesting by today's standards, it's different. There's not such a focal point in cultures as it was then. Like, we had a more common language. If you went to school or even transferred schools or whatever, people all played a very similar sort of library of games, whether it was Nintendo or Sega or whatever it was. And so that always drove us to want to draw things out, make maps, make characters, that sort of thing. But funny enough, I didn't ever really get a chance to make or do any programming for quite a long time. And I think that was just circumstance. There was no one around who was technically minded that I knew in my life, whether that was family or friends. or any means easily to learn. So the barrier to entry, funny enough, for programming was really difficult, but the creative stuff, not so much. And so I learned programming when I went to university. Even at school, we did other kind of odds and ends. But when I did computer science at university, then it was a complete, change. It was very much learned many languages. We did tons of projects as you do. And I really took a shine to that. I really enjoyed it and learned a whole ton of languages. And at the time, sort of the predominant language that was being pushed in the universities here was Java. And I think at the time that belief was probably multifold, as a bit esoteric, but I think they were trying to get a cohort of programmers who could do multi-platform. Java's big thing at the time was that it was multi-platform. But the benefit of that was that it's a very familiar language to C, C++, and now C#. So that was an excellent sort of fortuitous turn of events, because then as Java grew a little bit, I started to try and tinker with games in my spare time, using, I think it was JTG. I'm not sure now. There was sort of these little tiny game engines or middleware you could do, and I would just try and recreate 2D scenes from games just to see if I could get my hand onto that. So that's sort of the one half of it, and then the other half was I worked in the internet industry. So this was in the heyday or the kickoff of high-speed internet, particularly in Australia, your ADSL internet. So I worked for a company, a locally owned internet company here, right as all of this was booming. And so I did a lot of, initially started on the call center there, and then got a job doing website work, and did a lot of web development work for them. Ended up running the website there and building a lot of back-end systems, sign-up systems, that kind of stuff. And then a lot of it was front-end. So the other interest I had was I was always really handy with either Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. I just kind of, as I was young, I'm not an artist by any measure, but I did start kind of doing design work in that. I even actually did do logo design for a number of years as a side gig. And all of this kind of converged around 2009, I want to say, when Unity was released, or at least when I had first come across Unity. And so I'm doing my 9-to-5 job, working in this business. We're selling internet. It's fun. Amazing group of people. It was one of the best places I've ever worked, just for the number of incredible, talented people, and they were all really fun. It was like, if you imagine, when you're in school and everything's really, everybody knows everybody, and it's a very sort of alive place. And if you're social and that kind of thing, that social aspect, this place had it. Everyone was around that same age. They were relatively young, and it was a highly social place. So it was all fun. And so at night I got my hands on Unity and I started tinkering. That's just as I do, and really, really found that fantastic because of the C# language. And at the time Unity was in several languages. I think they weren't sure which one they were going to focus on. So they had, I'm not sure if they had Java, but they had, I think it was JavaScript. They had JavaScript and C# and a couple of other languages. Excuse me. And they would compile all into the same thing, but I think it became a maintenance nightmare. So eventually they said, you could clearly start to see that they would focus on that. But C# is a very similar language to Java, so I picked it up really, really well. And that was it. That was like, this is fantastic. We can finally do all these things I've wanted to do. I can visualize things. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to create a game engine. I can just make games. And so that tinkering led to then when eventually the opportunity came up with Team Cherry, because they were friends of mine. We knew about the Kickstarter and that kind of thing when Hollow Knight went through. They wanted to move the game into Unity because it had been built in another engine. The sort of prototype was built in Stencil. And then I said, well, guys, Unity's the big thing. This is the new hot thing. We can move it into this. It's multi-platform release. It's a proper engine. Let's move it in. And that's how that conversation began.
Wow. I will I'm going to age myself as well, but I will say before we move on, there was nothing like the feeling of going to the video store as a kid and getting to rent a game for 3 days. There was something so special, and I feel like we shared that experience. It was so special to like go with your friends and be like, "Oh, should we play this for the weekend?" So getting to kind of hear your story up until you discovered Unity is cool. And I had the same reaction when I first opened up Unity as well, where it was like, oh, we don't need to reinvent the wheel with every single game. We have an engine that we can go off of. And obviously there's a ton of customizability with the engine and what we can do inside of it. But that was also kind of a big aha moment for me.
Yeah.
So continuing kind of where you left off, tell us what it was like working on Hollow Knight.
Yeah. So after the Kickstarter had run, and it was very, very quick. Everything happened quite quickly, but the what happened was, the Kickstarter was in the middle of the campaign. So at the time, Will and Ari, who founded the idea, were running this campaign. It was doing very well. It sort of led off very nicely. Excuse me. That's when I reached out and I said, "Hey guys, like if you want to move this in, let's do it." And they said, "All right, well, let's run the campaign. Let's see it through. If it succeeds, we'll get started and we'll do a project." So this was late 2014, I think, and I was on holiday. I was actually down in Tasmania visiting family, I remember. Nice. And I was sort of, focus was out the window because I'm texting the guys going, "Hey, how's it going? What are we going to do?" And so once we all sort of chatted about what we could do with it, I said, "Look, I'll jump in." I had just actually gotten a new job, so I was still on probation with a new job. A dear friend got me a really nice job to start off. It was a very well-paying job, but I had to make a call and say, "All right, well, this is a full-time thing." Like the Kickstarter campaign went really well. The delivery times were hilariously short. I mean, I think that's what a lot of devs fall into. I see now that, I will get this done in 9 months or a year, for a game like that. And so, and then January 2015, keys to the office, keys to the studio. And I remember day one, I went in there, put the furniture together, assembled a desk for everyone.
Yes.
And set everything up. I was also the tech guy, so I set all the the equipment up, everything, and we just hit the ground running. And it was, in hindsight now, it was, the planets really did align. So it was really interesting that things went blisteringly quick by what I see now. And I think it was just because the three of us sort of had this skills overlap that was just in the right spots. Each of us had a sort of specialty, but we could also speak the other's language, and that really helped a lot. And so, kicked off a new Unity project, hit new, label the project Hollow Knight, away we go. And that was in January. And by July, we were demoing the first demo at our first con. So, which was just a subset of the Forgotten Crossroads.
That is no time at all to put a demo together.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. And that was so building all the Knight controller and save systems and all of it. So we did have, I should say, we did have some assets. So one of the things we did was the stencil version of the game had a basic set of assets, but it had if anyone ever finds the footage, it's a much more simplified version of the Crossroads with a lot less sprites in the background, because it didn't have as much detail in it. The parallaxing was simulated, so there was only 6 or so layers. And then we ended up importing all of those assets in. So we built an importer engine. We pulled the tile maps in as well, so that we didn't have to redraw them from scratch. So there was a little bit of a head start there, I suppose. The Knight's sprites had been drawn for a game jam that Will and Ari had worked on, called Hungry Knight, which was, I think you can still find it somewhere.
Yeah.
So the original Knight sprites were the same sprites. And
wow.
Then, they just translated from this isometric game to 2D platformer. So that was sort of kicking it off. And then, building that first demo, there was some really great things that just fell into place. The parallaxing was one of the big ones that I really thought, that was the first big win we had, when we thought, hey, look, we're in a 3D engine. we don't need to put 6 layers in and simulate this parallax. Let's instead of, and at the time I should say, Unity did not have a lot of 2D support. It was, it was still called Unity 3D.
Oh, really?
And people were kind of making 2D games in this 3D engine, but it didn't have a lot of dedicated support for things like that yet. So we thought, all right, well, rather than do what you see in all the tutorials and have this 2D orthographic camera, I thought, why don't we try a perspective camera? Let's get a really narrow field of view. Let's get a 3D perspective camera. Let's put the sprites into the scene in 3D space and then just layer them in this depth way. And that absolutely enabled this complete transformation of how we could build and the detail that we could put into the levels. And Ari just took that to the next level with the amount of things he put in. So I always tell the story that we went from 6 layers in the crossroads to, I saw one that was 950 layers of sprite depth, so we could just go as far as we wanted with it.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And not to even account for like the size of the map. The size of the map is massive. It is a massive game. It hadn't even occurred to me that Unity didn't have 2D support at the time, because I've only ever worked in a Unity with 2D support.
Yeah.
So that must have been quite the challenge.
There was a few things there. We had to, overcome some things about the sorting modes in the camera and some stuff like that in the rendering, but it was nothing we couldn't sort out. And so again, it wasn't a barrier to us proceeding. We just tested this idea and then we just ran with it straight away. So we were very fortunate. And then the other draw for Unity that was excellent was that there were asset store tools that were available. And again, that just saved us a ton of time. So we leveraged those pretty quickly. One of them was a tool called 2D Toolkit. It doesn't exist anymore, but 2D Toolkit then was exceptional as a benefit to allow us to compile the libraries of animations for the sprites. It had excellent frame handling because we were all frame by frame animation. It was all traditional. We don't have any, rigs or anything running in there. And that made that a lot nicer as well compared to using like the Unity animator system, which I think to this day still suffers from not being that friendly to a more 2D workflow or a sprite-based workflow, I should say. So yeah, those were a huge help. And then Playmaker was also one that we had used early on, and that was a kind of a state machine-based system that allowed us to do the enemy AI and just track a more visual way. And so that really opened it up for William to then start building all the enemies, and he did an amazing job for that. So and every boss is so unique, and I can only imagine in that short time frame the amount of work that went into something like that. But after Hollow Knight, you've been working in this 2D environment. You went on to work on Exo One, which is very much not 2D. Tell us a little bit about what that shift was like. Yeah, that was actually one of the draws, I think, as well. So Jay Weston, who is another local or Adelaide game dev here, had been developing this game. And actually, while we were working on Hollow Knight, he came and showed us Exo One sort of in the really early days. And he was a mutual friend through Ari. And he's an environment artist originally as a game dev. So he'd been doing games since the late 90s, I think. And I really liked the way he was able to create these sort of really nice visual effects with really minimal assets. It's not an asset heavy approach. He's got an excellent grasp of the camera and how that can be used. So once chatting to Jay again, same thing. He needed a developer to help him finish this project, and that was one of the draws for me. I thought I'd like to learn 3D. I heard a lot of stories, and we made a lot of other dev friends over the years at Team Cherry. And one of the things we saw at the time was any studio that had a successful 2D game and then went on to try a 3D game, the next game, they struggled. And I think there was this, at least at the time, there was this assumption again, Unity makes it easy. What's another dimension? We'll be okay. But
what's the Z-axis?
Yeah, what is this other axis?
It's done.
Yeah, I clicked the orthographic mode off, and whoa, what is this? Yeah. So that's vanishing point. That's absurd. So Yeah, it's the asset pipeline. You know, the thing is that
Mm.
producing things, if you're used to doing sprites and you're drawing in Photoshop and you're exporting your PNGs into Unity and then you're using those, that is completely different to building a model, taking that model file, bringing it in, texturing it, doing your UV mapping, doing your materials. That alone is enough to make it way more complicated. So the draw for me was Jay had already done quite a lot of work on this game. He was several years in, or a few years into this project. And I thought, okay, I don't have to do the figuring out at the start. We can just get this thing done. And so, yeah, it was great. It was really interesting. It wasn't as challenging, I'll say. It's actually easier than I thought, having someone put the groundwork in for those assets. But once you get going from the programmer's perspective and doing things like the movement of objects and that, it's not so bad. It's not that different. Those principles still apply. But yeah, it was beneficial. It was a simple game as well by design.
What was the most challenging part about moving from 2D to 3D?
Oh, you know, I don't think there was
Besides
anything.
the Z-axis.
Yeah, besides the Z-axis, I think nothing stood out. Actually, it might have been, you know, as much as I say that, probably the most challenging one that we ran into on this particular project was because it's for those who haven't played it, Exo One is a gravity-based movement system. And so your craft doesn't accelerate with any of its own power, or it has very minimal. But you would sort of click your mouse button and that would increase the amount of gravity you'd have. So the idea was you would come over the crest of a hill, and as you crested the hill, you would accelerate or increase gravity, and that would accelerate you faster down the hill. And then you'd release before you'd get to the end of a jump, and that would allow you to take flight. That gravity system inherently works fine in 2D, and you're on a flat map and everything. But we did a level in Exo One, and it's, to this day, I think it's the least popular level, but it was actually one of our favorites to do. Was we did what we called the 3D gravity level. So you start on a really tiny moon that's very, very small, and you actually have to get out of the orbit of the moon, so out of the gravitational well of that moon. And there are several other sort of asteroids through this level. And to get to the end of the level, you actually have to go from the orbit of one to the other. So we had to completely rewrite, for just that level, we had to completely rewrite all the physics for that level, so that we had orbital mechanics working for these tiny little, you know, celestial bodies. And that was sort of challenging for a while there to, excuse me, to validate it, because anyone who's ever played, I'm sure anyone's played Kerbal Space Program will tell you, orbital mechanics are not intuitive at all. They are really weird to validate, and the things we kind of are used to on Earth, they don't work the same way in orbit. If you're on a space station and you throw a baseball downwards, the next orbit, it'll come above your head. It'll come around the other way, and you go, how does that work? Why? You know, acceleration and movement are different. So
yeah. The only reference point that I have is playing Outer Wilds, which is a beautiful, beautiful space exploration game. And that's all I want to say, because it's that game deserves to be played with no knowledge going into it. But I watched a documentary. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
it's so good. But they did a documentary of how they developed the game, and exactly what you're saying. They were like, yeah, it was trying to build the physics of this, challenging.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So after Exo One, now you're working on your debut game for your studio. So I wanted to ask, what was the impetus to start Ember League?
Yeah, well, I think so. After Exo One, I kind of I'd been doing that kind of part time, and I have another business I do consulting work, sort of business management consulting, that kind of stuff, and I did focus on that for quite a bit. But the game dev bug never leaves you, I think, and so that itch at the back of the head just kept, you know, it was always there. And I think one of the things doing the more businessy work is that sometimes it really does lack that creative outlet. And as much as I try to bring that in there, it's not the same. And so my mind wanders. So I'll sit there and maybe we'll be in a business meeting and I'll just have this little other thread in my head that's just little chirping away and it's ideas floating around. And so that's what started it. And I think ultimately it was this game idea that's been in my head for quite a while that I wanted to try out. And I thought, you know what, I've done 2 commercial games. I'd like to do the 3rd one as something that I've written. And so that began that process. And quickly I ran into, okay, this is not something I can do as a solo dev. I don't have either the time or the skill set to do all of that work. You know, huge admiration for anyone who's a solo game dev. It is a mountain, and it is not just because you're on your own. There's so many things to overcome. So I started looking for people I could work with, and I thought, well, I'll assemble a team of people who can help me with bits and pieces. But through that management consulting, I'd met my now business partner, Alan Evans. And so he and I got talking just while we were working on things together in this other job. And I was saying, look, I've got this game. I want to try and kick off the ground, but I'm struggling to get things together and whatever. And Alan had always been really interested in games, you know, and he's got a tremendous amount of experience starting businesses. You know, I would say he's a serial entrepreneur. I've lost count how many businesses, and it's in anything, you know, all sorts of different things, whether it was selling gemstones or he had done international trade or, you know, so, and the consulting work. And so he said, well, why don't we partner up and let's found a studio properly and let's throw some resources at it. And we always worked really well together. You know, I love working with Alan, and he's an excellent mentor to me as well for a lot of things. And yeah, we just started bouncing these ideas, and I said, look, I've got this idea. We did, you know, Hollow Knight seemed to really resonate with people. They enjoyed it. I've got this game idea that I want to try out. Initially, the concept was a cinematic platformer combined with kind of what we would call a Metroidvania now, but trying to combine these 2 genres a little bit. And that was the start of the idea. And then Ember League began, and we started finding people right away.
Love that. How much are you allowed to share about your debut game? Because you've shared kind of snippets from, let's say, a year ago on social media. Obviously, the team has been really hard at work working on the title, but how much would you like to share? Or if that's enough of a teaser, you know, that's okay too.
No, we can talk about it. I think that's good, and I'm curious to hear anyone else's questions on it as well. But yeah, we had released some material early on, so we've been in development, and we went through a long pre-production with this game. Plus, at the same time, we were doing a lot of establishment of the studio as well. That's been quite a challenge, I was saying. So a lot of time has passed. So we're about 2 years in to this project, but it's going really well. Like at the moment, where it's at is fantastic, and I'm really eager to get it to the state where we can share it. We've kind of only got really bits of snippets and things are unfinished, but we want to try and put out more material. So it's been a bit of radio silence since we last published material. And the interesting thing is the game has evolved a lot since we last showed it. So the amount of rigor we put into it and the testing and the ideas sort of revealed a lot of things for us. You know, the strengths and weaknesses, this idea of can the cinematic platformer blend. And I mean, we can go through all of that. I won't dive deep into that, but if you'd like to, let me know. But ultimately, where we are at now, I'm very happy with where it's going. We have a fantastic team of people. You know, we've got this core team of 4 of us, plus a number of people doing part-time bits and pieces, very talented. And yeah, I'm really, really excited. I'm super eager to get it to that point where we can share little snippets of it more and more.
I love that. I feel like working on a game is always kind of this double-edged sword where you're so excited about what you're working on, but of course it always comes with challenges. There's always something that goes wrong, always. So I'd love to talk about kind of both of those sides. What has been the most exciting part about working on the game?
I think it's working with the people. I think that's been excellent. Is that it's been very eye-opening for me as well to do something from this position and look at, running more of that coordination stuff, as opposed to being on the tools all the time. And the exciting stuff is, seeing it come to life. It's kind of almost cliched in that way, but seeing it come to life to go, okay, we had this idea, this little tiny vestige of an idea, and we've now turned it into this real thing. It is working, and that for me is good because it's that validation. I like to see, I think like most of us, we like to get some of those little bursts of positive feedback. And for me, that just comes in the form of, look, that crazy little idea you had that was just incomplete actually did open a door, and it did work, and it does actually have potential. That's so good, because that for me is just fuel to keep going, to go, okay, let's pick at it some more. Let's, as Alan says, pull threads on this. Let's pull the threads.
I do like that a lot. And to use kind of the analogy of, I'm sure everyone has seen kind of the graphic of, a miner in the mines, like going and looking for gold or gems or whatever. And, it's there, but you can't really see it. And so it's really special when you're able to dig up a little bit of gold or a little bit of, whatever gem it might be. And kind of, for me, at least, kind of keeping those wins close to my heart as hope almost to fuel me has been really important. At least in my career, it sounds like it's maybe similar for you.
Absolutely. You need to have those, I think. And it's with a good team, we're also, one thing I encourage, because half of our team is remote, that we communicate as much as possible. So we have our Discord and we share things, and it's like, let's not wait till the next week stand up to do a show and tell. Let's just get it out there. You've got something you finished right now. One, you're on a high because you got it done and it works. Share it with the rest of us. We want to see it too, so that we get that little boost. Because what ultimately happens is we all see that progression, and it does make you feel like you're not stuck. Because working solo, you can get caught, and you get caught, whether that's writer's block or any other creative block. That can sometimes be the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe in that vein, the other side of the coin of, being excited, finding your wins, digging for gold and finding gold, is the challenges that come along the way. And there was an article that I read, this must have been over a decade ago, that talked about, regardless of what path you choose, there's going to be pain in every single path. So, for example, I'll pick just kind of a generic example. If you want to be a rock star and you want to be a guitarist in a rock band and do that full time, you have to bear the pain of your fingers hurting all the time, of you going on tour and not being home for several months, et cetera, et cetera. In the same way that if you choose a different path, there's going to be different pain. And the thesis of the article essentially was, don't choose the success that you see at the end of the line. Choose the pain that you want to endure. And so I'm curious, I'd love to hear more about the challenges that have come up, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, and how that failure and challenge has shaped you. Because for me, I feel like I fail on a weekly basis and make mistakes every single day. And, you kind of just, you take them and you log them in the back of your mind, and you go, okay, I know better. I'm going to do better. And, but regardless, like with anything that we do, there's always going to be some sort of challenge.
Yeah, I think it's important not to fear that. And I am probably the prime type of candidate. Based on my personality type. I know I tend to be very risk averse, but it's that pain and it's those mistakes and it's that risk you take that is your growth. That's essential. And if you spend a lot of time trying to overplan, over strategize, and see all these things ahead of time, you will still get caught off guard. I'm far enough into multiple careers now to say that just, you cannot see those things. And you can anticipate them, or you can expect them, as you're saying, and that's good. Sometimes that's the pain you can't choose, because it might be in a form you don't know, or others may not have experienced. Something comes easily for someone else that might not for you. But if you, I think you're right. I think if you choose that pain, if you know that there is risk involved and there is some sacrifice involved, absolutely. The big thing I think I see a lot with indies. That's very common. The reason I think indie studios are really amazing is that they do take those risks. And if they're in a position in their life that they can, and often younger teams are, they those risks can yield those rewards. So yeah, to speak to the stuff that we're doing now, again, yeah, that absolutely happened. I thought I was very well prepared. There was a lot of reasons for us to found Ember League, not the least of which that Alan and I have a lot of experience managing businesses. So I've worked with well over 100 other businesses at this point, looking at how they operate and how they basically what we do is we would go into a business, look at where all their pain points are. We'd help them establish an IT infrastructure that supports it, but it's about business outcomes. It's about, like, what are you trying to do? What is your actual objectives? And then how do we build things to get you there? So we thought we had all of this with us to go, look, the business side is fine. We'll have no problems. We've got all of this, capability modeling and everything that we can do as a skill. That's not where the problems were. That's not where the pain points were. The challenges, I think, came from trying to establish. The big one was, I knew going in that we would have to establish an asset production pipeline. And while indie studios, when you're small, even at Team Cherry, we didn't even have to do that. It just fell into place because, again, we were 3 of us in the same room at the same time. We knew what we were doing and the scope was very small. With Ember League, what we found is that, one, half of our team is remote, and you'll hear of a lot of people say that that's challenging. And I've heard some really experienced game devs talk about that, even swear never again to do remote work. But yeah, a challenge that came out of that was communications. So, in this day and age of all this amazing long distance communication that we can do, the issue is that the quality and frequency of communication is very important to be in the right size for the need. And remote teams have that extra bit of responsibility and burden on them to communicate more, because you aren't in the same room to have those little throwaway conversations. Will and Ari and I would turn around and go, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? Maybe you deposit some geo into a bank and something happens. That comes about from those conversations. If you're remote, you can't have those. So that was a bigger challenge to overcome than I thought. And we tried lots of things. So that was just through failure that we figured that out. And then otherwise, I think it's just experience, as well as just learning that, I rolled into this thinking there'd be a lot of people who are very hungry for dropping everything and then just grabbing tools and fixing the first thing that needs to be done. And that realized that's my nature. I'm a fixer. I like to pick things up and I just make myself useful in things, but not everybody is like that. And so some people have a very focused skill set. They won't step outside of that. Others want a super broad skill set and you can't feed all of that. So that's a challenge. So it's a lot of these things took some time to figure out.
That makes sense. On the remote work bit, it's so funny because when I did work in an office, I didn't get anything done ever, because people would always come and tap you on the shoulder and you'd be like, oh, I'm doing like really technical work and now my focus is broken. And now it's going to take me 30 minutes to get back to doing that. So for me personally, remote work has been incredible because I can really focus my time. But to your point, there is the extra burden of communication and establishing that and everyone understanding, hey, this is how we communicate. We have this like Discord channel over there that people can like go and co-work in, even if you're silent, just to kind of share space and share ideas. So definitely hear you on that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Distraction thing, by the way. So one of the other jobs I'd had in the past was as a project manager, and one of the things that you learn through studying that is the distraction factor and utilization of people as resources. That every distraction, every context switch, so hat switch, if I take my hat off and I go from finance mode to project mode or whatever that is a 15-minute time loss. So there's a ramp up time to get your flow back. So you want to keep your resources in that flow state as best you can, but every person is different, so you've got to cater for that as well.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I ended up buying like big headphones so that people wouldn't come up to me when I was wearing
Yeah.
my big headphones, and still, like, you just get tapped on the shoulder all the time. So
Yeah.
it's okay. I love working remotely. Um, but switching gears a little bit. So you mentioned you're the founder of Ember League or co-founder of Ember League, but you're also creative director. Tell us a little bit more about what does it mean to be a creative director? Because I feel like that role is highly dependent on circumstance, studio, game. Um,
Yeah.
what's it like? What do you do on a weekly basis?
I ask myself that question every day. What does it mean to be a creative director? Yeah, it is. It is highly context sensitive, and I think it's also, it applies. Yeah, we're in a small studio. We're a little indie versus a AAA. There's huge differences on that, but ultimately, to me, and what we're doing at Ember League, the idea is, look, there's a set of responsibilities that go through people. And I've worked, in organizations that tried to do a lot more of a flat hierarchy. Everyone's on that same level. What we found was you need a little bit of leadership for groups, just so that somebody can ultimately take a call on something, make a call and say, look, we'll go this way. We've got to make that call because we don't have time to look into this, whatever that might be. So that was sort of the core role, and it is now what it is. The idea that, like, we've got art, our art assets, and we've got now an art team, but then whoever's art directing can make sure that those things get done. But after that, it goes through that final stage just to say, look, is this matching the vision? And I think that's the role. If we talked about how businesses work on outcomes, in their intent and their outcomes, for studios, I think it's that idea of your vision is your outcomes, or at least your vision might be your intent, and then your outcomes are always going to be that thing of, like, this is the finished product. Somebody has to check that against it and say, is this saying what we want it to say? Does it feel right? So it's kind of like, yeah, I think of that. I think now, rather than like thinking about the code or the character controller and going like, oh, it needs 0.3 seconds more of this, I look at it more of like, does it feel right? How does it feel? Because that matters the most. And then whoever's working on that will do it, or whether I work on it, whatever that is. So, but it's a bit of everything. And then the story writing and all of that. So that's the other whole side of it, is writing all of the lore, all the world building, all the narrative. I've put a lot of time into that.
That's fun.
Yeah, that's the part I've really enjoyed, because that's different to my past roles of more technical stuff. This has been fantastic because I get to do a lot of the world building stuff, and it's great fun.
I love that. Is it safe to say that as creative director, your role is essentially cohesion, right? With anything that's made by anybody on the team, it has to have cohesion to ultimately achieve that vision.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've been hearing our weekly meetings, but you're absolutely right. That is one of our words. You've got the fly on the wall.
Happy to join anytime.
Yeah, I don't even need to do it. You can run it at this point. The cohesion and consistency are two of our words.
Yeah.
I think I need a third one so we could call it the 3 C's. But
there you go. Yeah.
Cohesion is absolutely right. Yeah.
Cohesion, consistency, and coffee. That's,
Coffee. Okay, there you go. Completion or completedness, something like that, perhaps. But
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because what happens, this isn't I should say, all of this isn't a slight on any person. The idea is that when you're on the tools, because I've been in that position, you get so stuck in the weeds that by the time you come up for air, you forget why you started that thing. If you spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks doing code for one character controller, whatever that might be, by the time you're done getting every tiny little detail to work right, you come back and go, what on earth was I doing this for? Why did I have to do it? You start questioning that. That's what the solo dev goes through daily, is to just question their own existence, right? And so as creative director, to me, that's the other thing. And I encourage my team to do that as much as they can, is just when you need that idea to bounce something off, you don't have to be like, hi, how are you going today? What's going on? Just message me and just go, what do you think? This or this, A or B? Is that crazy? And then you've got another voice. That's it. And that helps a lot.
I think it's so valuable. And as someone, I'm a freelancer, I'm working on multiple projects right now. So I'm constantly going to the person that I'm reporting to on a game and being like, is this consistent with the vision? Is this consistent with what we want the player experience to feel like? What does this evoke in you? Is that what we want to evoke in the player? Etc. And I always do, at the start of a game project, I always do like a big listening session, and we'll just listen to video game music and be like, we like this, here's what we like. We don't like this because we don't want this instrument. And you kind of leave that meeting with like a big list of to do's and to don'ts as like a musical North Star, or if it's sound design, as a sound design North Star that you can kind of refer back to. But regardless of the fact that I have that, it's malleable, it changes. And so I feel like I'm annoying sometimes because I'm like, are we headed in the right direction? Because I'd rather know now than 5 hours from now.
Yes.
And so as a leader, I think that's incredible what you're doing, is kind of that open door for people to just check in and tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, when you have a moment, can you check this? Because you're right. Like, it's human nature when we're in the weeds. I'm sitting there, whatever, designing a sound or writing a piece, and you're so close to it that you need someone to give you that distance and perspective. So
yeah, you need that 50,000 foot view, as we say, and that's really key. So as people get more experienced, I found that the really talented ones, the brilliant people I've worked with, and that they can do that themselves. They get used to being able to step back and look at the work and critique it without the other eye. It's very hard to do, but I admire anybody who can do that. And I've even seen some do it on the fly, that as they're working. I mean, Ari Gibson is a brilliant example of this. The sheer speed that he can work at and accuracy is a tremendous amount of experience, but it's just that was his talent. And seeing it happen live was that it's he would always say pragmatic design, but it's also then what I'm learning now in hindsight, because we're doing a similar game, is that there are design decisions that are made on the fly at the time to go, this is, if I choose pathway A, that's going to take a lot longer to finish and implement. Even if it's not right now, it's foresight to see that I've got, I don't know, we had this recently with characters with legs, and it was like, whoa, we actually animated way too many legs and way too detailed movement. We could have just done little nubbins and just done it a lot faster, because you barely see it. To catch that early, that is the experience, I think. So that's what we use as our guide as well, and we try to look for that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, hindsight is 20/20 vision, of course, but catching that early, very important.
Yeah, but it's also that's your wisdom, and that's just being able to look for that.
Yeah, absolutely. In a similar vein, maybe, when we first met, I thought it was a couple years ago, it was early last year. We quickly started talking about curiosity and grit and following your curiosity. And some of my favorite life advice is follow your curiosity, like follow the things that you are interested in. And that's led me down the path that I'm currently on. So I'd love to learn, what does it mean to you to follow your curiosity in the context of your game dev career?
For me, I think it's one of my 3 attributes. If you had to describe them, probably top of the list might be curiosity. Is follow that, and curiosity as an inherent trait, but also it's that being comfortable to ask questions and then explore them, and not be afraid to see what those outcomes are. And so for me in game dev, I mean, the whole reason I'm here to do it now, and I'm lucky enough to make a career out of it, is that I did follow that. I did look at that. I did say, can I do this? Can I make it work? Following to say, look, this idea resonates with me. Hey guys, Helena looks great. I think I can make this work. I'll just figure it out. I'll see how I go. And then exploring that. So that was the starter of it. And I'd say now what has changed for me is that curiosity now means creative ideas, to go, there is something we want to do with this. We're in I said before, there's these teeny little idea bubbles, and sometimes they don't mean anything. I capture all of it. I try to capture all of it. And then no matter how crazy it sounds, give each one that chance to flourish. So I think that's what it means now, is that creatively when we go, I'll turn around to Alan, I'll just be like, hey, what if we did this thing? I'm like, this is nuts, but I'm like, I haven't seen a game of this genre do this before. What if we just open that up? And, you know, the benefit in the case of working with Alzi, he'll humor anything as an idea. He'll be like, he'll try it. He'll never say like, that's stupid or that doesn't work or whatever. Just be like, yeah, I think you could make this work if we did this. And that's pursuing that from that creative aspect, whether that's if you're a visual designer, if you're a sound designer or audio, I really like seeing that. I've had the benefit of working with some amazing people already. That is when you yield those unexpected benefits, those unexpected little gems that form part of the game. And at the end of the day, you know, for me, I just want to make something cool that I can share with people. And so it's not about like where the idea came from, whose idea, as much as it is, does it serve that end thing? So I think, yeah, I think pursuing those and not shooting things down. That's another businessy thing they tell you when you brainstorm, is to never say no. And the idea in a brainstorming session is just capture that idea flow. So yeah, I think it's the same way here, is explore those little things. And actually, real quickly, I'll touch on that too. One of the things that I'm very much working on right now with the team is, rather than prescribe, you know, you were saying you've got to go like, hey, does this sound right? Is this good? That's a direction, but what it shouldn't be is a chain to stop you from moving in any direction. It should be, it's not like it's going to sound like this and that's it. I want to create the ecosystem, the little sandbox within which we can explore, because I don't know what's in there. And that's when you find the gold, as you were saying. So make those little places to explore in the context of your story or game or whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like a lot of music making is curiosity, at least, in asking, hey, is this going to work? Or if you're recording something when you're sound designing, it's, what if we did this weird sound? And then you start processing it and you find something new. So I totally agree. I think there's a balance between, will this finished, you know, processed sound or art asset or piece of music work for the vision, but there's also inherent curiosity in the process of making that. But also, I think we found your third C. It's curiosity.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. we'll have to write that one down. I'll
there you go.
For that. That's very good.
We found it. Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to talk more about your game dev philosophy. And when you're making games, what do you keep in mind from that standpoint?
I have a few, actually, and they sort of developed along the way in the early days, just either through observation or things we discovered that served us well, that I thought were really, really good. But I think I'll rattle off. I actually noted them down because I wanted to remember the core ones. The first one that came to mind was, don't assume players won't notice. This is kind of it's very game devs focused, but there were games I had tested or seen, or other people's games. You go to a con and you play them, and there would be elements that are incomplete, unfinished, or expected that the devs kind of hand waved off, and they would say, you know, oh no, that's just not a thing. And often it's trivial stuff. It's not hard to implement. There's no real core reason not to add that thing in. And you know, as an example, I think one of the core ones, if you're making a production game, you want to sell this on platforms, on Steam, whatever, have your control remapping as a feature. You know, the number of games I see that do not do that, players will really appreciate it. They will thank you for it. And in the case of something like in Hollow Knight, I'd put in controller remapping. We'd had it in there, but there were one or two buttons that I just hadn't thought of to include as a feature. We got lots of emails about that. People very politely requesting, saying, look, it's an accessibility thing, whatever. Can I map to this mouse button? Whatever it was. And so next patch straight away, put it in, easy, no problem. It was not a lot of time for me, but it made a lot of people's lives a lot better. So things like control remapping, there's all sorts of features, whether it's gameplay or just the game feature itself. Those things, I always say, like, don't assume the player's not going to notice. Don't assume that, oh, I left that animation out, or my jump animation doesn't quite work, or it's just going from running pose to instantly in a jump frame. It's like, well, you should have some sort of linking in between. It will make it work. The player will notice, even if it's subconscious, and that will help your game feel more complete. And they will build a better relationship with it. And actually, all the philosophies, to be honest, I have are all about that. It's let your player build a relationship with you. There are a number of ways to do that, but let them build that relationship. Don't let them get hung up on something trivial that then prevents them from exploring and enjoying the thing you're trying to share with them. So a controller shouldn't even be on the back of their mind. They should just be playing as if it's, you know, an extension of their body. So that's one that comes to mind. One of the ones that we've always had in every game as much as possible is every player action should provide some sort of feedback. This is a little thing, but again, I really see that a lot as well in games again, whether that's just, I've gone up to this door, I can open and close doors as the character, but here's a locked door, I can't open it, and I press the button and just nothing happens. That players may figure out. I mean, in something like a first person perspective, you'll go, okay, that's a door I can't go through. But what if the door just rattled a little bit? What if it didn't, you know, it just gave you some action to say, yes, I've acknowledged your button press, you've done a thing, whether it plays a small sound. I think actually, I remember the first Half-Life had this. It just played a very tiny sound effect, like a little rejection sound, just to let you know, yes, there's an action, but no, you can't open that door. So that's a really, really important one. That gives your world tactility, and I really, really like to see that. You'll see a lot of that in games. So yeah, that's a good one. Finish your game. Finish your game in as many senses of the term as you can. So whether that's, I've got this feature and I've tried it out, and it depends how long you know the production you are, but I've got this idea. Push that idea a little bit further, explore that thing, follow that curiosity, and say, well, what if that idea, you know, just had that little extra feature, and make the effort to implement that, to put that in. Again, I would see that people would be like, yes, I've got this game, but it goes up to a certain point, and then I'd be like, well, in the natural progression you'd expect from here, I don't know, you're delivering papers on a skateboard, so maybe I'd expect to see something else, or maybe I can upgrade to a bicycle or whatever. Explore those things, finish that thought, and get that idea out to completion. It's usually not that much further beyond where you are now, but your player will love it as well, again, because they might have the same question. They might say, oh, what if I could do this? Let them cater for that. So that's that's been one. And then, yeah, as I said before, explore your ideas further. I think that was a big one for the guys at Team Cherry as well. We all shared that. Every single idea wasn't just that particular idea in isolation. It always got pushed further. If you smash this sign, every time you come back, that sign is repaired. Well, why would it be repaired? Well, actually, wouldn't it be cool if, like, there was a character that came and repaired the sign, and then every now and then you return and you catch them repairing the sign. And so that was the idea, right? But then push the idea further. Well, what if you go up to this character, they fly away, so you never actually get close to them? All right, well, what happens if a player is clever and they happen to hit that character with a spell and they kill the character? Well, then what? Well, then that character drops an item or does whatever, and you can see that there's a progression. And it's to an absurd level almost sometimes, but that is the fun, to go, oh, I actually discovered that this sign gets repaired and there's a whole character attached to this. That was the fun part of game dev. I love that stuff. If you can get to a point to build that side of stuff, that's the really fun stuff. So I encourage that with a lot of people. And again, pragmatically, you know, don't build this lovely game and then only have one or two of these in there. Be able to do those quickly, but have a whole suite of them if you can. Think of them in here and there. Ideas. Again, that sense of discovery that you get out of it, I think, is really fun. So that's where that comes from. Follow those ideas through and challenge them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much that we could get into there, but to your earlier point, I think players notice. Players really, really notice if there is love and care and thought put into a game, and you can tell just by reading Steam reviews of games maybe that have resonated with you, that people do notice the small things, and the small things end up being the big things. They're the things that give a game personality and heart and soul and humanity. And yeah,
and people will
definitely
find that.
noticeable.
I loved hiding secrets and things like that, and we put things into Hollow Knight that at the time I was like, no one's ever gonna see this. No way. And it didn't feel like a waste of time. Like, again, we did it because we could, but I was like, man, maybe a very tiny proportion of people will find this. No, people found everything. They found everything amazingly. They found things in there, and they put things together that we wouldn't have even expected. And I love that. I think that's fantastic, because that shows that they have ownership over this thing as well. It takes that life of its own.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'm doing a quick time check. I think we've got time for maybe 2 more, and then we can open up the Q&A if that works.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So going back to the first thing that we spoke about, which is going to the video store and renting games. Yeah. I grew up around early consoles, early PC gaming, point and click games. There's some games that I was having this conversation recently where I'm like, oh, I played this game and I know what it looks like, but I don't remember the name. And I'm like still trying to dig up these games that I played, a really long time ago. Yeah. But, the shift that I've noticed is we've gone from the industry being the likes of like only large companies are able to make games and distribute them to consoles and now Steam, to now small teams having access to, we spoke about Unity, having access to game engines where you don't need to write absolutely everything. You have a foundation to go off of. And that access, I think, has been really meaningful and has caused kind of the quote unquote boom of indie games and indie studios starting to be made and distributed. And I think that's incredible to see and incredible to be a part of. But I'm curious, what are your observations about indie game development that aren't talked about very often?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm trying to remember, because it's changed a bit. I started this about a bit over 10 years ago, and at the time, probably the big one was there wasn't enough, even just tiny amounts of funding available, at least not locally to where I am. That was very difficult. Where very small amounts of funding relative to other businesses, you could get a great kickoff to a game. So that at the time was probably the one I would say. Now, actually, an observation on what you just said, something that only as of the last, let's just say this year, that I've really observed, is that the nature of what we're doing and the way the studios are operating is very similar to the way it was in the 90s. And I hadn't thought of this. I agree. All I saw growing up was, there's no business here, there's no work here, how are you going to start? How are you going to, the barrier to entry is too high, it's too expensive. I think what I'm not hearing enough right now is indie games are extremely expensive. Game dev has unfortunately very quickly become expensive, I think, just as the world, with a lot of inflation and things like that, has come in. That's one thing I'm seeing, and it's tricky. It's becoming more and more difficult, unfortunately, I think, to see groups of 3 or solo dev or do something like to get things out. And the reason is not the same. So in the 90s, let me go back a little bit. The reason I say this, I recently watched a really interesting documentary that had just come out on a game called Syndicate. I think it's just came out on YouTube, and it was a 3-hour documentary on the making of Syndicate. One of the things I observed there was, it was a team of maybe 4 or 5 people, with a couple of, there was a musician, a couple of contractors. That's the same as I see it now. And I go back and I read the making of Wipeout, or earlier games in the 90s, stuff that I liked as well, not all of them were huge teams. Some of them were small and they didn't have a lot of funding. Yes, sometimes they had publishers, and the reason that was because getting your game out was expensive, not making the game was expensive, right? So let's take a game like Wipeout as an example. Printing CDs, I think at the time, was something like $500,000 minimum investment US to get a batch of CDs printed properly. So, you know, that needed a publisher, that needed venture capital investment, whatever it is. Now, thanks to things like Steam, that barrier is just gone. You don't need to have that. So that barrier is lifted, a different one has appeared, and that is complexity. Games now, despite having Unity, despite having all these amazing tools, games are becoming more and more complex. And so you'll see a game like Wipeout, and I think I saw in their book, there was someone had taken a photo of the project plan. So they had their Gantt chart, and I'm looking at this Gantt chart and I'm seeing they're like track design, level design 1, level design 2, all the way down to whatever, level design 6. And the whole window was only 6 months. And you go, oh, you built all your levels from scratch before you even had art assets, and the whole thing was done in 6 months. So the whole game is built in a year or less, or whatever it might be, you know. So there is a side where I think maybe there were fewer assets that they had to build. There was less complexity in the code. Yes, they had to build tooling. So I'm not saying anyone has it easier, but I feel like the games have become more complex, and we spend a lot more time now on that side of it. Even things like having constraints around file sizes or image assets, those things are starting to disappear a little bit. But that also means that now we're spending more time adding a lot more things, because players have that expectation. Like, there are games you would have played as well. If you think even point and click games, the features they had were not as rich as you would see now. And so there's this expectation that if you want your game to do well, you need to put in features people expect. What's one you see commonly? I don't know if you see this a lot, but I remember Supergiant Games talking about this on the development of Hades was because they did it early access. Players started demanding fishing as a feature. And they're like, well, we did not set out to make a game in the underworld about fishing. And they had enough demand for it, they had to put it in. They're like, all right, you guys want it, we will put it in. That is a piece of complexity that they had to account for. That's just how it is. So, and it did them very well. Power to them. They did an amazing job, and that game is very highly regarded. So that, I guess, is a long way of saying I think that player expectation is changing. The games are becoming more complex. That barrier to entry is changing. It's easier to get started. It might be easier to build the game, but it takes longer to put all those things in.
I am 99% sure that I have played Wipeout. Is that the racing game?
It is, yeah.
I have definitely played, yeah.
Spaceship game, so yeah.
I've played Hades, and to your point, like, fishing is a whole system in Hades now. It's like, there's different types of fish. You fish different types of fish, and then you can trade them for different things. Like, it's a whole system. That's fascinating. Actually, I didn't know that they didn't have that initially.
Yeah, and in a game, and you think about a game in the 90s, if it was Hades and it was isometric like Diablo or something like that, it might have been a single animation they might have added as a fishing thing. You'd go up to a side of a pond and you press a button and they just play an animation, not an entire system of like, here's your subspecies and, whatever. So that's the difference, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Last question before we open it up for Q&A. What advice would you give your younger self? We spoke about this when we were prepping last week, that this is advice that I got from my mentor years and years ago, which is, in the present moment, you are making decisions based off of the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience that you have at your disposal today. You can't reach your arm out into the future and pull future experience towards you. But in a situation where you could, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think take more risks. Don't be so risk averse. That's just, for me personally, as a nature thing, is take those chances. Don't be afraid to fail. Make more things. even to this day, I'm still the type, I like to hide away and build something very, very nice before I show you what I'm working on. Sometimes that's not the best way. Sometimes just put the material out there, share it with people, show them, even if it changes, even if you don't finish it, then that's okay. But just do more of those things. So explore more, fail more, and definitely grow from that.
Oh, I second that. I could have a whole 3-hour conversation about that.
Yeah, give yourself permission to fail. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I
Mm.
think my observation in my life has been the more I have failed, the more I have built the resilience to fail. And I also have a very natural risk aversion. My risk aversion has kept me from doing things that I love and making things that I love and doing the things that I want.
Mm.
And it's scary, but I do agree. I think building up the resilience to be able to withstand risk and the unknown outcomes that can come out of that, I think is one of the most important life skills.
Yes.
In general.
Yeah, it does get easier. It's like any kind of exercise. And as you build that, you know, confidence is really important as well. We don't talk a lot about that. This is not even game dev. This is just personal stuff where you go work on that confidence, because that helps, it gets people so much further forward. And one of the ways to do that, if you're risk averse, yes, build that resilience against failure. It's okay. And you will get better at thinking on your feet. And that, I think, is the essence of it, is that rather than worry about, here's a scope, you know, Marina, I need to have this scope done and you've got this short window and, you know, what do you think? Do you think you could do it? And you going, no, I'm not going to touch that. You'll go, I think I can figure it out. I'll have a go. I'll give it a shot and I'll figure it out. That gets you a lot further forward, because the next time that comes up, you won't even think twice about it. You'll just dive in and go, yeah, look, I already tried it out last time. Here were the learnings. I'm good. I'll figure the rest out. Sorry, go. No.
Sorry, no, please.
No, I was just going to say, a lot of the people I work with who are extremely confident or experienced in that, that's the trait that I see in them. They'll be able to give you a rough estimate of how long something will take and how how it can achieve the outcome without having to go through all the details. They'll just figure it out.
That resonates a lot. I love this. It's just becoming a live chat, but I would love to open it up for a Q&A just for the recording. I'm going to do a little outro and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But David, thank you so much for coming on the show. For everyone who is here or who is watching the VOD, thank you so much for being here. Our social links will be in the description. If you'd like to follow us on social media, definitely follow David and Ember League. And if you have any feedback or topics that you'd like to see covered in the future, let us know. Any last parting words, David?
No, just thank you to all the players, and it's all of you who keep these things going, and the love we've all seen over the years is just immense. It really is. So yeah, thank you for playing. I always say to every single one of you, thanks for playing. Check out the new stuff. You know, if you liked Hollow Knight, we've got more things on the way. I'm sure there's going to be such a great, and not just from us, other devs, the stuff that's coming out you're going to love. So yeah, let's all have fun.
And I'm really excited to see more when the studio is able to share as well. So yeah, very keen.
Hoping to do a lot of that soon. So we'll try to get, my aim is to get to a bit more frequent cadence once we've got all the kind of base stuff in place. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Congratulations again on, I mean, obviously all of the success with Hollow Knight, Exo One, with this new upcoming game that we'll get to see more of hopefully very soon. And thank you so much for your time. This was fantastic. I really, really appreciate it. As you know, I'm sure everyone does who's hanging out here as well. So
absolutely.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks everyone.